Greetings, I'm your host, Jason Miles, and welcome to another episode of This is Revolution Podcast for all the returning listeners, subscribers, and of course, our very valued patrons. Thank you so much for coming back. To those new to the channel, thank you for taking a moment to check us out. If you dig what we're doing, please hit like and, of course, subscribe. It is a passive gesture that goes a long way in promoting the channel. Just to let you know, this show you are watching is a pre-recorded program. Our original guest we had scheduled for Thursday had to reschedule once again. And we were lucky, dare I say blessed, enough to be able to speak with Greg on such short notice. That being said, this is not a live stream, so we won't be able to see your comments, but of course, we'll be able to read and respond to anything you have to say in the comments section of the video. So definitely feel free to sound off there. And also, after you watch this show, when it premieres, we will be going live to a champagne room where we're going to watch another one of our Christmas movies. So that's still happening. That's still going on. And of course, that will be live. Just a brief reminder that if you dig the wide variety of programming we provide here on TIR and you want to make sure we can stay on air, become a patron or a paid YouTube subscriber. When you become a patron or a paid YouTube subscriber, you get champagne room and movie night access for as little as $3 a month or $30 for the year, a one-time payment of $30 for the year. You get the satisfaction that your small donation goes a long way keeping TIR on the air. Now, let's get into it. The Chomsky Epstein emails. Recently, Noam Chomsky made news after a photograph surfaced showing him alongside someone many on the left would consider his sworn ideological enemy, Steve Bannon. Compounding the controversy, the image reemerged alongside the release of emails connected to the late Jeffrey Epstein, a convicted child sex trafficker whose name has become synonymous with elite impunity. Chomsky is not someone I would consider part of the global 1% that used Epstein as a kind of concierge service for power and privilege. If anything, Chomsky existed on the far periphery of that world. While it is true that Epstein donated to MIT and exchanged some emails with Chomsky, they were not what any reasonable person would consider friends. Still, the photograph and Chomsky's presence at what appears to have been an Epstein-sponsored event have led some to assume complicity, or, at the very least, a willful turning away from Epstein's crimes. What many seem unable to grasp is how easily a photograph becomes a suitable for proof. Images feel like indictments, even when they are anything but. We are all seduced, for example, by the iconic World War II photograph of a sailor returning home and passionately kissing a woman that we believe to be his love in Times Square, long celebrated as a symbol of American exceptional, triumphant swagger. Only later did we learn that the woman was a stranger, grabbed and kissed without consent, yet the photograph remains frozen in our collective imagination as romance, not assault. So what was happening in the image of Chomsky and Bannon? Was Chomsky bluntly telling Bannon that he disagreed with him to his face, while Bannon laughed it off? Or were they swapping tales of U.S. plunder abroad? We will never truly know. The photograph offers no transcript. What we do know is that our current president, while denying involvement with Jeffrey Epstein, is documented to have known him well, along with many other public officials. Against that backdrop, it's difficult to understand why a retired professor's casual email correspondence is treated as a moral emergency. Yet, here we are. Today, we'll be speaking with historian and author Greg Grandin about his recent essay in The Nation examining Chomsky's email correspondence with Epstein, our reoccurring desire for heroes, and what this entire episode reveals about our current political moment. Please give a huge TIR welcome to Professor and author Greg Grandin. So glad to have you here. Thank you, Greg, for taking the time to talk with me.
Thanks for having me on.
Now, what motivated you to write this essay now? Was it the substance of the emails themselves or the reaction to them that felt the most revealing?
think it was the reaction to them, mostly on social media. Uh, Chomsky's 97 years old, and I imagine that the vast majority of people on social media are a lot younger than that, and um, and and uh, and Chomsky, long before the revelations of these emails and the relationship with Epstein came out, it's kind of a touchstone. How should I say it? Uh, Around issues like Syria and Ukraine. I mean, Chomsky elicits a lot of passion. There are people who defend him, and the people who defend him are largely the people of his generation or younger, because there are few people of his generation because he's 97. But people who kind of came up with him and have a certain impression of him. And as one person said, a friend of mine said, he was our internet before the internet, because he just seemed to have at his disposal an enormous encyclopedia of information. And of course, he was a famous dissenter from the Vietnam War, from Israel, and onward. And he was right about so many things. And then along the way, he made quite a few of enemies to something. I won't say enemies, but detractors, either because they had conflicts over his linguistic theory, which was hegemonic. Chomsky, we don't have time to go into this, and I'm not capable of explaining it, but Chomsky pioneered what is modern linguistics with his notion of a kind of universal capacity for grammar, which many understand as a kind of a structuralist, but also you could kind of assert a certain kind of morality to it, that there's a certain egalitarian humanism, that everybody is built with the same capacity to be creative and to learn. And there's been debates and disputes within linguistics, but then later on there were arguments about Cambodia, about Bosnia, about Syria, about Ukraine, where Chomsky came out and with certain positions that that certain people didn't agree with. Sometimes it broke down. It was certain campism or sectarianism, which would be beyond my understanding of exactly what was at play. And Chomsky was always capable of defending himself, and he also often got in trouble with some controversy because he was an absolutist when it came to free speech.
Yes.
It's well known that he wrote that he was asked to write an essay of defending free speech by, I don't know all the details, by a French publisher, a French author, and then it was used as a preface to a book by a Holocaust denier, and Chomsky backed down from it. Although later on he did say he regretted that it was used for that purpose. And then he also defended the right of Walt Whitman Rostow to teach at MIT in 1969, when Rostow was an architect and very enthusiastic defender of the Vietnam War. And people like Howard Zinn and others who were in Cambridge protested that and these are people who would remain Chomsky's allies for life on other topics, other issues and other fronts. They were on the other side of that fight, and even right from the beginning, there was a lot of Chomsky had his critics because Chomsky found some way to reconcile taking Department of Defense money, even as he posted, for his linguistic work, which may or may not have been folded into weapons programs. Again, that's beyond my understanding. I've read different things that it was useless, proved useless. No, it was integrated. I don't know. But so anyway, Chomsky was in many ways a flashpoint already when these revelations came out. Now, what he also was in a coma. I mean, not when the revelations came out, not when the first batch of revelations came out, but in June 2023, he suffered a paralyzing stroke that basically has left him unreceptive to this point. And my understanding is that he's not coming back. And so he's been silent through Gaza. October 7th happened a couple of months later. And right before this stroke, I don't know exactly when, there there were revelations that he was in uh, Epstein's network. Now, right before that, there was a bunch of the revelations that people like Steve Pinker and Lawrence Summers were involved, and and all sorts of people were like in Epstein's network. I even tweeted, before the news of Chomsky, I sent out a tweet saying, I know somebody who spent their whole career at MIT and somehow managed to be successful without participating in Epstein's silly salons.
And then this happened.
So it comes out in 2023. More emails are released, and they're confusing. I mean, if people want to jump on them, you can jump on them. But it's clear that between 2015 and 2016 was the most active correspondence between Chomsky and Epstein. There was a letter found in Epstein's. Actually, the letter came late. I'm sorry. I'm still talking about when Chomsky was able to respond.
Yeah.
An email came out that it seemed like him and his second wife, his first wife Carol, who was married 59 years, that passed away in 2008, and Chomsky remarried Valeria Wasserman Chomsky. That he and Valeria attended a dinner with Woody Allen and Suni Previn at Epstein's mansion, was even flown down on Epstein's plane. And that there was one financial transaction between him and Epstein that the way I understand it is there was some problem with Carol's probate distribution of funds, and Epstein helped. I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. So then the Wall Street Journal asked him to account for himself, and this is where he gives a kind of infamous quote that is rightly rankles in some people. That doesn't sound. He said, well, first of all, it's none of your business. I don't understand why I have to answer who I associate with. And then two, Epstein did his time. Mm-hmm. He's talking, he served his sentence. He was talking about 2008, the 2008 sweetheart plea deal, in which Epstein didn't really serve any prison time. Really, he was kind of on house release, and the larger investigation into the wider network of pedophilia and servicing the elites, the world's elites, the world's privatized aristocracy, was being investigated but shut down. So so at that point, Chomsky's 94. So I don't know. I mean, why he said that? Maybe if he had been conscious long enough to reflect, maybe we would have gotten more information. But I could imagine the Wall Street Journal calling him up, interrogating him. I mean, and we also have to keep this in context. Chomsky. It's hard to imagine how busy, how many people Chomsky sees in a day, and talks he gives, and I mean, it's just exhausting, and that's part of his thing, right? His image as a kind of self-denial, of kind of a monkish kind of constantly working, but also constantly available, answering every email, which of course is how I met him. I sent him an email cold. He answered it. Next thing I know, I was in his office talking about Guatemala and Central America. This was back in the 90s when I was doing my dissertation work at Yale. And that's not a unique story. No, the idea is that Chomsky made himself available to everybody. So, you could see in these emails that Chomsky was like speaking to the UN, speaking to the EU, speaking to Amnesty International. He was all over the place. So you can imagine that even if he socialized with Epstein, 5 or 6 times, it was one, minuscule percentage of what his larger social world is. So he must have been a little bit unsure how to respond. I think that's how one explains that kind of unfortunate. He did his time, And who knows what Chomsky actually knew? This is the question, right? So you have in 2008 is Epstein's plea deal in Florida, in which he pleads guilty to 2 acts of solicitation, one of them with a minor. And that's not news at the time, as far as I know. What becomes news is when Virginia got, I don't know if I ever said her name out loud, the woman who committed suicide and sued Alan Dershowitz and sued and Maxwell. Virginia Guthrie or something like that, Guthrie. And that was kind of in the news in 2015 and 2016, but it died out when she settled out of court. Now, right at that time, Epstein had started a campaign of rehabilitation, and he's donated hundreds, say $800 and something thousand to MIT. And my understanding is MIT's president was pushing a lot of MIT scientists onto Epstein, including Chomsky. Chomsky would participate in MIT's fundraising events. And that's probably where he met Epstein, right around that time. So before and then just to situate it, so we have the 2008 plea deal, which isn't national news as far as I know. It starts to become known around 2015 with the suits against Dershowitz and Maxwell, but it dies out after they're settled. And then in November, when the Miami Herald, I think her first name is Julie Brown, writes a damning, basically writes the expose, exposes everything. And from then, it's from November 2018 onward, it's like everything that the dam breaks and we learn everything about Epstein. And as far as the emails show, and I don't know if this is more emails may come out, I don't know. Chomsky's last email to Epstein is well before that Miami Herald expose.
What do we lose, Greg, when optics replace analysis in the situation of Chomsky's picture with Bannon?
Yeah. Well, I was shocked by that picture because it's first of all, it's a picture. And you never know what the larger context is. You never know. Is he grimacing? Is he smiling? Is he laughing? Is he what? It seems to show. What's so shocking about it is that it seems to show a more lighthearted Chomsky than anybody I ever met. Even though Chomsky had a pretty good sense of humor, but it was a wry sense of humor and a reserved sense of humor. And so it's that picture with Bannon, which I think shocks people. And I'm sure there's more pictures. I'm sure there's pictures of Chomsky with Epstein. And so I think there has been a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction on social media. Social media, as we all know, is primed for virtue signaling, primed for a lot of kind of self-righteous quips, including like the one I sent when I thought that Chomsky wasn't involved in Epstein, but Lawrence Summers and Stephen Pinker were. They're primed for that kind of thing, and so I think that you lose a lot, and you lose a lot of the context. And I think what happens in the case of Chomsky is that all of the people that he had rankled for whatever reason were primed to believe the worst, right? Because he didn't have the right opinion on Ukraine, and then there was Cambodia, which apparently, of course, the critics who claim that he was denying genocide in Cambodia are absolutely wrong. If you go back and read what Chomsky wrote about Cambodia, it's actually right on. Or what he wrote about Bosnia. These are all. This is the thing. if you were to tell me that Noam Chomsky, basically, who came up of age, or at least came into his political career around Vietnam and Israel,
Mhm.
and saw Vietnam, Israel, Chile, Indonesia, the rest of Southeast Asia, uh, you know, we can go on and on. Bangladesh, in which the U.S. as a coherent Cold War empire uh, exerted enormous amount of damage and destruction in the world. That he was so immersed in that worldview that he wasn't capable of kind of dealing with the complexities of Syria or the Ukraine or Bosnia. If you were to say that, that'd be fine. It's absolutely fine. It's a statement. We could talk about it. Maybe it's right. Maybe it's wrong. But there's more to it than that. People. I mean, especially around Syria, Chomsky became a symbol of I think their own impotence, because what could one say about Syria? I mean, it's not like anybody wanted the United States to invade Syria or to. I mean, nobody was defending Assad. It was unclear what the options were, and to some degree, I think a lot of that frustration that that there wasn't a clear
Bad guy.
political. Or a clear political option where a true humanist anti-imperialism could take a stand, so that they became a little obsessed about Chomsky. But again, I think Chomsky continued. He went on. Chomsky didn't need anybody to defend him when he had his voice, and yeah. And
Well, do you think Chomsky is being judged here as an individual or as some sort of symbol of leftism, morality, righteousness? Because it seems more than just an individual
yeah.
account.
Yeah, I think it's both. I think he is a unique individual, right? I mean, obviously, like there's whatever the way that his brain worked and the way he presented himself and the kind of certainty in which he was very stubborn. He rarely admitted to ever be wrong about anything. And I think there is something particular about Chomsky that it is about Chomsky, and that includes, I think, debates and arguments that went on within linguistics and struggles, but I think it also is a symbol for a larger thing, and that's the problem, right? He bears all of the weight. So let's assume I mean, what are the options here? We could break it down. One is that he was participating in a pedophilia network of Epstein. That's to say the least. That's probably very unlikely.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say he knew about the pedophilia ring. I would even say that that's unlikely, even though maybe by 2015 he should have. But okay, so he was socializing with Epstein, and he was socializing with Epstein in a way that was kind of, legitimating Epstein or giving him, giving Epstein what he wanted, access to these marquee names in science. My sense is that's what he's guilty of. Epstein gave Chomsky access to a lot of people that Chomsky wanted access to. I'm not talking about Bannon. I'm talking about other scientists, right? There was, it was the kind of get-togethers that when Chomsky was famous at MIT for, even though he was down with the anti-war humanists, he did his work with the war scientists. He did the work with the engineers and the computer scientists and the mathematicians and the biologists. He liked that interdisciplinary science where he understood and rooted his linguistics within. So the people that Epstein was getting together at these get-togethers. And again, we have no idea how many there were, or
Yeah.
that Chomsky attended. He said a few. He said, a few. And that was the appeal. I mean, I think it does stand for something. I think we can say that, yeah, it does represent a certain kind of gendered network building that reinforced, a certain kind of, hierarchy, and even whether Chomsky knew it or not, was a fig leaf for more more for more overt crimes. That Jeffrey Epstein was a pimp servicing the global elite, and his victims were children. And whether Chomsky knew or didn't know about that maybe he should have been aware of it. But then again, here's where context comes in. He was in his 80s. And the president of MIT was pushing Epstein on MIT scientists. And Chomsky also I know from somebody who knows Chomsky better and knew about this before Chomsky talked about it. Epstein did want to meet Ehud Barak. And Epstein brokered that meeting, former prime minister of Israel, because he wanted to interview or speak to Barak about the failure of the January 2001 Taba Accords in Egypt. I think he wanted confirmation that it was Israel who broke them off, and he got that. So there was ways in which Chomsky was using these as he always does. Again, to say he was circulating among elites. He was circulating among elites his whole life. It's just that this last gang of elites look particularly
very comic book villainy. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this last, yeah. I mean, it's one thing when you're hanging around with elites from MIT in the 1960s and they're wearing their narrow ties and their pencil holders, and they're doing square root divisions to figure out the trajectory of, interballistic missiles or whatever they're doing. They seem less evil than a Jeffrey Epstein or
the Epstein crew with Larry Summers and the Trumps. But
and Bannon wanted to, from what I could, my understanding is Bannon wanted to meet Chomsky, and Epstein brokered that meeting, and Chomsky, being Chomsky, said, okay, I'll meet him, because he does meet everybody.
He meets everybody. Does the left long for heroes? If so, why does that impulse persist even in movements that claim to be anti-hierarchical?
I think it's okay to have inspirations. This speaks to larger questions of leadership and organization and representation, and to what degree democracy is a process of representation, or what degree it's more than immediate experience. These go to deep political science and political theory questions. But without doubt, the left yearns for heroes, and it has heroes, and it just has to understand that those heroes are humans with flaws. I have a deep love for Noam Chomsky. He shaped the way I saw the world when I was at Brooklyn College. I went to college late. I'm the first person from my family to go to college. I worked for 8 or 9 years after high school. I went to CUNY. Chomsky came in. Norm Finkelstein was teaching at Brooklyn College when I was there.
Shout out to Norm.
Yeah. And I didn't even meet. He brought Chomsky to speak. I didn't even meet him. I was in the audience, but that's the first time I learned the joke that Norm told me, is that every time, and this is back in 1985, that whenever he's asked what the title of his next, what the title of the talk is going to be, because he makes these commitments so many years out in advance, the title is always "The Current Crisis in the Middle East." It's because there's always a current crisis in the Middle East. And so, my point is that, yeah, Norm, I mean, not Norm and Noam were big influences on me, and also just as, and this is what was shocking to me. This is what was a joke for me because, I I didn't see him. I mean, I appreciated the self-denial and all that stuff, and I'm going to answer every email that comes in. But I also felt like he had a good bullshit detector. That he skewed this self-affirming tautologies in which the elite understand themselves to be good because they're powerful. They're powerful because they're good. So it's a bit of a shock to see him within that crowd. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to write that essay, to try to work out that idea myself. And I don't know if I got over the shock, but reading the emails, the actual emails, there's a couple of things. One is, most of the time Chomsky's responding to Epstein. He's not initiating the conversation. Second of all, he's not engaging with the kind of banter or bonhomie, the good, the kind of, silly chatter that you see in Lawrence Summers' emails, where he's asking Maxwell how to neg on his, on his teaching assistant or whatever the hell he was doing. Chomsky's emails to Epstein sounded exactly like the emails he wrote to me. I mean, there was one email where Epstein forwards an article about religious extremism or something like that, and he said, and Epstein, says, for me, religious extremism is the worst, and no matter what side it is. And Chomsky immediately corrects him. This is like typical Chomsky. Chomsky's like, secular nationalism is worse. And then he goes on about the rise of the right, and then he segues into Obama and the way liberals don't understand how horrible Obama was. And so there's none of this like, hey, give me some advice on how I can pick up
some co-eds. Yeah, I got
there was not. So I make that point. He wasn't a kind of sentimental member of the Epstein class. He was answering emails, and the other thing is that he was more often. I guess that's just a cliche. More often than not, no, probably not more often than not, but he was often the object, of course, of Epstein's other correspondence. People seem to be, kind of upset. They had a fascination with Chomsky. I cite some woman, I don't know who she was, but she was the head of Apple and Microsoft at one point, and she, Chomsky's a genius. Ehud Barak said, oh, he's very impressive. And then there's one great email from some guy. Do you have the article at Joshua Bach or some one of these fringe kind of transhumanists, singularity types that effective altruism, AI type. Apparently he's very influential as an intellectual, and he writes this long email to Jeffrey Epstein about how blacks don't have the cognitive ability for certain things, and women, the way they learn is that they develop a framework of motivation between pain and pleasure. And then, it's all of this kind of racist and sexist stuff. And then he winds up by ending, and then he ends the email. He says, so if all of what I'm writing is true, then Chomsky's theory of universal linguistics doesn't hold anymore, or doesn't hold, is untenable. So the whole point is like, right there you see, whatever problems, whatever technical or scientific or biological questions there are about Chomsky's theory of universal language, the premise of that theory is that we are all equal and capable of all of the same, of capturing and appreciating the wonder and majesty of the world, and bringing it in and interpreting. We're all equal, and and here's some guy that's like dividing up the races and the sexes and saying this all proves that Chomsky's universal theory of universal language is wrong. That was one of the an email that you would find that referenced Chomsky that had nothing, that Chomsky wasn't involved in the conversation.
Well, Greg, again, I don't want to take up too much of your time today, and I do want to again thank you for taking the time to talk with me on such short notice.
Oh yeah, no, there's something we should also probably talk about, the letter of recommendation.
The letter of recommendation is mysterious.
Yes. Now, this was released after Chomsky had gone silent, so we can't get any information from them. But there is a letter of recommendation that was found at Jeffrey Epstein's papers. That was it was a 2-page letter of recommendation on regular white computer paper that was supposedly from Noam Chomsky. And it's the most quoted bit from all of the Chomsky releases because it has the most pull quotes. It's the one where he calls him a dear friend, where he's he's curious and he sparks my, I enjoy the conversations. I learned so much from him. It's all of this effusive stuff. Now, this is the stuff when people say Chomsky was a good friend of Jeffrey Epstein. It comes from this letter, and this letter, I don't know. It doesn't sound like anything that I've ever seen Chomsky write. It doesn't have Chomsky's signature on it. It has this type name. It's not on letterhead. There's no email log of Chomsky having sent the letter to Epstein. It seems like something that Epstein, one of Epstein's self mythologizes himself as,
which isn't out of the question for Epstein.
Yeah, which is and also Chomsky's long-term secretary Bev Stoll doesn't think that Chomsky wrote the letter. So that letter is kind of what people seize on to say that they were good friends. Where Chomsky himself, before he had a stroke, identified the relationship as an acquaintance. So, I would take what we want. Look, more stuff can come out. That totally sweeps away all doubt about the closeness of their relationship. That's more damning. Stuff can come out that's more exculpatory. Who knows?
Well, is there a lesson to take from this controversy? That what should people on the left actually be learning from it? Well, I mean, there's no lesson specifically to Chomsky. They should learn. I mean, younger people, I think, should learn who Chomsky is because he has had a remarkable life. And there's no shortage of stories about Noam Chomsky. The larger question, I guess, is, of course, this isn't going to happen because we're living in a world of ever quicker takes and ever quicker responses. But just the willingness to throw people under the bus so quickly, especially somebody who has, for decades, has been available for people, is some caution. I suppose, and I think that they are right. There is also a gender analysis that could be done about Chomsky's relations with Epstein without necessarily be damning about Chomsky. I mean, Chomsky, there is no doubt that Chomsky moved through the world because he had women around him. He had his first wife, he had his second wife, he had his secretary. He could be the kind of, bookish rabbinical genius that, doesn't know how to work an ATM machine because his wife knew how to work an ATM machine. Yeah. And those are all valid. These are all valid points, and nobody's saying we want to go back to that
period. I mean, that was, he came up at a certain moment, and that was his life, and it was. But I don't think it's particularly damning of him. It's the way it's of his moment. And we can certainly learn about that, and we could, and why was he blind to Epstein? Why didn't he see who Epstein was? He was correctly focused on crimes of state and the the predations of capital, but maybe he should have had a wider panorama about different kinds of exploitations and violence. And again, this is not saying. I think we can make these points without it being without it being taking anything away from who Chomsky was and what he did.
Do you think there's something in academia that they view certain situations like Epstein as almost true crime-ish and almost garish to a certain degree because it isn't a crime of state? It almost feels like just a salacious scandal, like something you see on an old school soap opera like Dallas.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just academia. I think it's also, just in general. I mean, look, that report just came out today about how Epstein made his money, and it's good and it's important and it's detailed, but it's completely missing his relationship to Israel, and it's completely missing any relationship he has to political forms, whether it be in the United States or whether it be, and the connections there, right? So, he's able to tell the story of how Epstein made his money, but somehow divorce it from the larger geopolitics of it. So it's not just academia, but yeah, I think, it is the salaciousness of Epstein. And Dropsite has done tons of stuff about Epstein's connections with Israel, the way he coordinated, he quarterbacked the campaign against Mearsheimer and Walt, that Dershowitz ran, to discredit Mearsheimer and Walt's the Israel lobby, and so there's lots of ways in which Epstein was it's almost more than he was an agent or an asset. He seemed to be above that. He seemed to be operating on some other level. His affection, he was obviously a Zionist, and he obviously was acting on behalf of Israel's interests, but almost on a level that's way above what we might call intelligence. I don't know.
Maybe he wanted to be James Bond in some sort of weird way, or beyond James Bond. Maybe he wanted to be Dr. No. I mean, who knows? But he wanted to be some sort of genius behind the scenes.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get a chance to read the whole article, but apparently one of his first romantic relations just said something along the lines, "I just realized he lied about everything. Everything was a lie."
That's why I'm not shocked that the letter may be a forgery, because I believe that's how he even got some of his early gigs, was forging and overstating.
Yeah, or maybe maybe he asked Chomsky, "Will you write me a letter of recommendation?" Chomsky said, "Well, you write. I mean,
you write it, I'll sign it."
The classic thing that academics do. You write it, I'll look at it,
I'll sign it.
And
like my mom did my letters from school. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Who knows?
Well, Greg, again, thank you for taking the time to talk with me. Wherever you guys are watching or listening to this show later, there's a link in the description to Greg's article in The Nation, what we should learn from Chomsky's emails with Jeffrey Epstein. Greg, can we get you back on the show at some point to talk about your latest book on South America?
Yeah, I'd love to. Anytime.
Okay, and we can talk to you a little longer that day.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Greg. And have a very good rest of your day.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much.
Peace out. That is Greg Grandin and Professor. I am Jason Miles, and this is pre-recorded, but I will see you in real life after this show if you are a patron or a paid YouTube subscriber, so we can watch Rare Exports. I believe it's a Finnish dark comedy about Christmas that I think you guys are really going to enjoy. If you want to watch that with us, become a patron. Patreon.com/Bitter Lake Presents, or a paid YouTube subscriber. Just hit join, and there's a link. You can watch the movie with us. And on that note, we are out. Peace.